Welcome back. In this video, we're going to spend a little bit of time just talking about sort of performance and a few things to optimize the performance of your game here. And then we'll start looking at adding up how many collectibles or pickups that you've collected, and maybe in this video being able to get that displayed on the screen. Might have to go into the next video for that. So we hit play, everything seems to run fine, and really, for this type of game, it's fine. We don't have to worry too much about it overloading your computer. It's definitely not going to do that. It's a pretty simple game. You can't get much simpler than this, okay? Especially that it's in 2D. But as your games get more and more complex, you have to worry a little bit about, say, the memory management, how fast the game's going to run on, a slower processor, especially on mobile devices, which are more constrained. Modern PCs, it's not as huge of an issue. But definitely, if you're running a 3 or 4 year old phone, which, I have a Nexus 4 and it runs, it's fine for me. But if I wanted to play a game, it might slow down on certain things. So you'd want to, as a developer, try to get as many devices as possible. It would run reasonably well on. So there are a few things you can do, and sometimes it's programming, how you're programming it. Sometimes it's making sure that you've set things up correctly. What happens here when we have something that's moving that the computer doesn't expect it to move? So basically, if something doesn't have a rigid body on it, the Unity believes that it shouldn't be moving. And so our player does have a rigid body on it, expects it to move. The pickups, on the other hand, have movement. Okay, they're rotating. And so what happens is Unity goes, ooh, it's moving. This is not good. I better go and recalculate all the collisions, okay, for all the objects in the game, even if they aren't moving. So in this case, really, it's just the walls that it goes and it recalculates the colliders, the positions of the colliders each frame. And so if you think about doing that 60 times a second. And then, if we had a much more complicated system, it'd have to be doing a lot more calculations there. So we always want to minimize the sort of workload of the processor. And to do that, what we're going to do is go back to the pickup, okay? Go back to the prefab, and we're actually going to add a physics 2D, a rigid body 2D to it, okay? Now, that's fine, okay? If we hit play here, what's going to happen? Well, remember, we had that problem before with gravity, okay? Now, you could just go in and hit gravity scale to 0, like we did before. But what happens when you do that is it still will react to, say, forces, to pushes and pulls on it. So we want to set it so that it won't react to any forces. And to do that, you just click is kinematic. So basically, if it's not being pushed or whatever, you can just set that to is kinematic. It won't react to forces. It will just animate, okay? And this is worthwhile for things like platforms, maybe elevators, things where we don't really have collisions, maybe doors opening and closing if they don't collide, things like that. So let's just see if that works. Good. So even though we have gravity scale set to 1, because we've set it to is kinematic, it will just animate and be not affected by forces. So we might want to just double check that everything's working. Okay. Seems to be okay. Yep. All right. And so our next part of our game here is to see if we can get some scoring going on so that as we collide with the object, we get, basically an addition here. So let's go into the code here and figure out what we need to do to sort of count up this, your pickups here. So just going to go back to the player controller. Always make sure you're in the right code there. Sometimes you end up writing the code in the wrong script and then can't figure out why or what happened to it. So what we're going to do is create a sort of a holder for our count, and we'll give it a good name. well, we'll make it private so that you can't change it. We shouldn't need to change it in Unity itself. It's going to be an int, which is short for integer. And the idea here is that it is going to be a whole number. You're not going to collect a decimal amount. It's not going to be 1.3 you've collected. It's going to be either 1 or 2 or 3 or whatever. So we'll make that an integer. And we'll call it count, just like I said. Just a simple name there. Now, we've got a count. What we should do is initialize how much our count is at the start of the game. And it would make sense to set that to, to 0. Okay, now you can give them 10 points to start with or whatever you want to do. It doesn't really matter, but we've set it to start at 0 here. Another option could be maybe it counts down. So we start at 12, okay, and then go down. That could be a possibility as well. So now we've got a holder for the number of pickups we've collected. We've set that to 0 at the start. And then basically down here, we need to add to that count each time. And so this is a good example of where we've, if we hadn't put into these brackets here, these curly braces, we'd have to put them in now. So we did that earlier. No problems here. So what I'm going to do is take the count, whatever it is, and then I'm going to take that count, okay, and add 1 to it. Okay, so let me talk about that again. So we're going to set the count, probably should have said at the start, to whatever the count was originally plus 1. So at the start of the game, the count would originally be 0, okay, because that's what it was starting at here. And then now we've added 0 plus 1, so our new value for count is now 1. Similarly, because this start wouldn't run again, now count has a value of 1. If we have another trigger, okay, if the trigger is set again, then count was value is 1, so now it's 1 plus 1 will give you 2, and the new value is 2. All right, save it and make sure we don't have any errors in Unity. Doesn't look like it, so it looks like we're doing fine. Now, of course, the problem is we can't see what's going on here. It's always a good idea to just play it as well, because some errors don't come up until you sort of run that function. So we had to have that trigger function going, and so we don't see any errors. But like I said, we don't see a display for how many we've counted. So theoretically, I should see that I've counted 12, and maybe now that I've completed the game, having a, you're finished or well done or game over would be nice to have. So let's talk about how we can do that. What we're going to do, I'm just going to minimize this, is we're going to create a UI element, okay? And so in the UI element, there's a variety of things that you can put in. As we get further along, we'll learn some more about these. But we're just going to do the text one for the moment. So I'm just going to put in text here. Now it brings in a few things. One is the canvas, okay? And basically any UI element has to have a canvas. The text, which we have, okay, which we're going to put our win or counter, I guess, on this one, and an event system. And we won't worry too much about this at the moment. Okay, we're really just going to focus on the text here. Now we can't see anything. Oh, there it is. There, new text. Okay, if I zoom out here, I can't really see it. And that's probably because it's sort of in behind here. Okay, what we want to do is make that text a little bit easier to see. You can change this here. So I'm going to call this count text. Okay, and you can see that it's changed down here. I'm also going to call this one count text too, because we're going to have a win text later on. So I'm going to call that count text. Okay, you can change the color. At the moment, this is sort of this off gray. I think I'm going to change it to something more sort of yellowy. Okay, or white or yellow, just to sort of see. So that's a little bit easier to see there. Okay, next thing we're going to sort of talk about is how do we actually position the text. Okay, now if you want to see how it's positioned on the canvas, this is actually the canvas here. Okay, and there's our count text. So this is really our window, okay, that we're viewing, and our count text has been put down here. Now if I set it to 0, and of course 0, 0, you can see that it sort of sets it right here. Now the UI is a little bit different than your regular sort of transform position. It's actually what's called here a rect transform, and that's have to do with sort of the anchoring and positioning in a UI where it's kind of a bit different than, say, an object in a game. For example, you'd want the score always to be in the top left, and so that's why it's sort of anchored there. Now you can move it over, or the easiest way to do it is sort of to click on this here, okay? And what we want to do is set the pivot and the position into the top left. So what I have to do is, like it says here, Shift and Alt. So I'm going to click both of those. And you can see that changed a little bit, and click here. And now the text is in this top left corner. You can see it in the game display as well down here. Now, it's not bad. It has a bit of an issue in the sense that it is jammed right up against the edge. So what you can do actually is move it a little bit over. So if I, change the number here, you can see it moving to the right, and I'll just bring it a little bit over. Again, probably the number isn't too important, but maybe I'll go for about 10 there. 10.5 would be fine too. It's not, again, it's not rocket science. It's just sort of what you think looks pretty good. Now, if you go higher, okay, it actually moves it up. So we need to go lower, and probably about like a -10 or something there as well. So that looks reasonable. If you want, you could also increase the font size. So again, just with the number there. Okay, well, not 0, but something reasonable, maybe 24, something a bit larger there. Okay, so we've got our text there with a little bit of space from the edge, and a reasonable size, and a good contrasting font so that we can see it. Now, it still doesn't have any interactivity. It just will, if we play the game, okay, it just says count text, okay? And it's not what we want, and it doesn't change. So we have to go back into the code and actually get this to display the count value, okay? So what I'll do is I'll do that in the next video. We'll get the count working. We'll also get the sort of you win, and we might be able to even squeeze in the build and finish up the game in the next video. All right, we'll see you then.